All right, welcome to part two of our retrofit process for the VWID Talk podcast. We're Wes and Jan once again. And what we're doing today is talking about the process that Jan uses and really anybody can use when you're doing a mod. You know, is it going to be mechanically feasible? Is it electrically feasible? And is it, or can we do the software part, the adaptations to make it work? And so today we're picking up with part two from where we left off, getting into some of the details of how these things work, how we're wiring them together, after looking at the wiring diagrams and such. So yeah, let's get to it.
We looked at why I decided to retrofit to change these taillights into a IQ taillights. And we started talking about the framework. We covered the mechanical feasibility. We talked partially about the electrical feasibility, and we still need to cover the coding and adaptation. But there's still a lot to cover in the electrical feasibility. So let's jump where we left off, which is showing the connectors and the wiring in real situation here.
Where you see on the left here, your brown original connector for the tail light has 3 pins in it that you just showed us. The gray and white, which is what's the gray and white again in this one?
I think it's taillights, and this is the brake and the turn combined signal.
Okay, that's tail light, and the red and black is brake and turn combined, and the big thick brown one is ground. You've only got 3 wires. You've got a combined brake and turn, a tail light for like daytime running tail, or when your lights are on.
Yeah, okay, exactly.
And brake and turn can be combined again because they're both red.
Exactly. So that's the whole problem, and that's the whole point.
Right. And so now you see. Did you want me to tell this, or do you want to do this?
Yeah, I just wanted to say one quick thing. So, for example, when I was retrofitting Euro taillights for my 2006 Jetta, there was enough wires leading to the back that only coding was necessary. So I think we just changed some pin locations. We just repinned it and then adjusted coding, and that was it. But you see here that in the ID.4, the wires are physically not there.
Yes. And so looking at this, there's a couple other things I'm noticing here is that the new connector for the IQ lights is not just blue. Look at the left of those. There is a keyed notch on there so that physically the male connectors will not fit into these female connectors because the notch is keyed differently. So that means you had to remove the connector from the harness and from I guess the other connector is built into the lights. So you couldn't just repin your brown connector. You had to get the right blue connector.
I had to get the right connector. Yes.
And did you depin your others, or you didn't recrypt them?
I just depinned it. No, depinned it. Yeah.
And so you can get cheap depinning tools on Amazon. It's still hard to, if you look I
wouldn't do the cheap one because that kind of lasts you for 2-3 depins. Pay some good money for that.
Okay.
Meaning pay dollars.
I got the cheap ones, but it came with like 20 different ones, so I was able to. I have like 5 of the same one.
But only usually one fits into these deepening holes.
You can see at the very top wire, the purple with the red wire on the hand there. That's a good looking hand too, by the way. You can see that you can see that there's a flap on the top and a flap on the bottom. So the depinning tool would depress both of those flaps so that you could pull
these
it out
flaps
of the
actually. Yes, these flaps. Yeah, exactly. So these are the pins. So right here it's very nicely visible. If I zoom it in, you can see that on the end of the pin, you can see those notches that are actually depressed by the deepening tool that you push in. But and also, it's a special connector. But also notice this rubber grommet here. Right, where the wire meets the pin, and that's because this is a wet location connector, right? Okay. Because when you look at, for example, this old connector, some of these holes they look white. They're physically sealed, not to get moisture into it. And then of course,
even if you could have reused the brown connector, if it wasn't keyed, you would have had to drill that out and hope you didn't mess it up.
Well, you can pull it out. It's like a silicon insert, so you can pull it out easily. Yeah.
Okay, it's a plug you can pull out. Okay,
it's a plug. Yes.
Show people one more time, Jan, on the brown connector on the far left there. The further left there. So you can see that they're numbered. So we're seeing pin number 1, 3, 5, and 7, and the other side is obviously going to be 2, 4, 6, and 8.
6 and 8. Yes.
But most connectors are labeled that way, and that makes it where you can compare. So this connector was labeled T8X, and the T was because it's a connector. The 8 is because it's 8 pins, and the X because it's number X, letter X out of. There's a T. There's a T8A, a T8B, a T8C, a T8D, presumably, and this is T8X. And I don't know how you know which one it is, except luckily
and
for
so
us.
actually, looking at the wire diagram, the blue connector is referred as T8W. So it has a different number. So you can clearly see that, hey, that's something different.
So every car may not have, maybe this car doesn't have an X, it just has the W, and the other only has the W, not the X. I mean, I just said the same thing twice. You know what I mean? The American car only has the X, and the European car only has the W, or whatever the option is. Okay, but the point is, when it says that something connects to T8X/3, T8X/5, and T8X/4, we can see the brown ground wire going into 3.
Yeah, that's exactly it, right? So this is the 3. This is the brown wire, right? So that this goes to 3. This goes to here,
and that's not a 13. That's a /3.
That's so, exactly. And this is number 5, and it's
/5.
/5, right? So that's the Schwarz rod, right?
Yeah, Schwarz rod is black red.
Black red, yes. Yeah. And I wired 3 additional ones because I wanted to also do the special one for the turn light, and keep the one for taillights if I need to switch back to the US taillight, because I wasn't sure I did this when I had the software version 2, and I was advised to roll back to the US version before the 3.1 update. So that's what I've done, and it was relatively easy. Okay. And then, of course, this is how it looks in the vehicle now when it's installed. There's some rubber grommet, so you like it's the entire another maybe podcast on like how to wrap the harness, how to insulate it correctly in the grommet so the water doesn't seep through it, and there's like whole another story. And of course, so just to wrap this portion, the new taillight connector, obviously, you see it's in the grommet, and it routes all the way to the front where the convenience or the central electric module sits, and that has, you see these blue connectors here on the right hand side on the picture, so they fit into these connectors here. So
okay, and that's T73B that you were pointing to, and the one on the other side was T73A.
I don't remember. I don't remember. Not. Again, there are things that are not logical. The wiring diagram has also a 3D model of your control unit, and it tells you which connector is which. So check the wiring diagram from
yes. Mm-hmm. Don't listen to what Wes says. Check the wiring diagram. That's the lesson. Okay.
So again, to wrap up the electrical feasibility, the taillights, the harness, the details about the harness are on the GitHub page. And also, if you would like to get a retrofit of the IQ taillights, you're in Europe, check this Kufatex offer.
Yeah. So if I were going to summarize this, Jan, real quick, before you do coding, go back. If you can go back one more and show us the connector one more time. You ran 3 wires to this connector. One is the LIN bus, which you said you were lucky enough to find that same LIN bus by inspecting the wiring diagram. Do you remember which LIN it is?
Yes.
Do you remember which LIN bus it was? Was it LIN 4 or LIN?
Refer to the wiring diagram. Right.
But you were lucky enough to find that in the kick sensor for the remote hatch opening. So you were able to tap into that in the rear of the car. But for the 12-volt wire and the turn signal wire, dedicated turn signal wire, you had to run those all the way to the front?
That is correct. Yes.
And you got the 12-volt from the fuse panel directly from the fuse
correct.
panel?
Yes.
Okay. So that can be another video we can do at some point.
Oh, yeah.
I posted it online how to, but I didn't actually show. I just did the research. I haven't done it yet. So somebody had asked on ID Talk, like, how do you remove this? And I was like, oh, I don't know how to do that. So you have to be very careful. You have to disconnect your battery, but you can pull your fuse panel off and add a wire that goes in, and you can add a real fuse. And that's really the right way to do this. You don't want to be clipping on what they call vampire taps or taps that cut into the jacket of your wire, because then you're piggybacking on things that aren't rated for those to carry that kind of current. But so the summary is, you ran the LIN bus from the trunk. That was easy. That's that purple wire you're showing there with the red stripe. And then you also ran the 12 volts to the front of the car and put it directly
the
into the
fuse
fuse
box.
panel, and then
Correct.
you ran that other one to
To the
T73
right slot in the fuse that is used on the Euro car.
in the European, yeah, and that's good too. So you even used, so anybody, if a European mechanic flew here, he would know exactly where that was, and
Yeah, because
that's a
it's
great
in
thing
the
to do.
it's again in the wiring diagram. There's a
In the correct
reference.
spot.
There's a fuse reference. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Right. So 3 wires, and the only one you had to plug in to the harness was into this blue T73A, and that's what you connected the turn signal wire to, or is that? Am I wrong about that?
Yeah, kind of. I think I depinned the one that was there, and I pinned there another one. Yeah.
Okay. So only 3 wires, folks, but it took a lot of research for Jan to figure out which 3 wires.
Well, and 3, but we are talking about the left taillight, right? Then the same for the right one.
Yep. You could use the same LIN bus in the back for the right one.
You can use the same LIN bus. Correct.
But you had to use the right turn signal wire and another 12-volt fuse for the right.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Right, so finally we get to, you made it fit mechanically, you got the electrical wiring done, now you got to make it work.
And of course, what I did, I turned on the car and there was the whole slew of errors on the dash. Yeah. Taillight not working and nothing worked, right?
Of course.
And so I had to figure out the coding. And for the coding, the best resources are the forums, either the VCDS forums, where I, for example, found some coding of a Euro car that had the IQ taillights. So I kind of was able to download and compare the coding. We've discussed everything on the ID talk, and the VW Vortex forum also has a ton of retrofits.
And for anybody that missed our conversation with Andy, Rostec, VCDS is the name of the tool. It used to be called VAGCOM, but it's a diagnostic tool that lets you program and make changes to your car.
In the coding feasibility, I also added this, any modules that need to be changed. And again, we were lucky for the taillights. There are no modules that need to be changed. Here is an example of this is again the central electronic unit. And another retrofit that we are looking at is ventilated front seats. And the ventilated front seats for the version 3 of the MIB entertainment and the software 3 vehicles is connected to the central electronic convenience or central electronic unit. And Wes, you talked about LIN. So this is exactly what decodes the LIN signal and sends it back into the internal computer of that controller.
Yeah. So LIN is a communications bus that they use in cars, and it was designed to be simpler and cheaper to implement than CAN. Yes. Which is another, what is CAN? Car Area Network, Convenience Area. What does it stand for? It's a different bus. And when you talk about a bus, you're talking about a control area network. Okay. When you talk about a bus, you're talking about a system where all the signals are on the same wires, and different devices are able to communicate with each other because they all have their address. So what we're looking at here is this green thing is a PCB, a printed circuit board. And they have spots on there. You can see empty spots on there for chips that are not installed. Like what Jan's zooming in on there, that is a spot for a chip with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 16 pins. And those two 16-pin chips are missing. And that's probably because this board was designed very intelligently for some other features that maybe we could have in other versions of the car. The features aren't present in this car, so they built this electronic control module without those chips. And this is what Jan has zoomed in on here. The chip we're zoomed in is the LIN bus controller chip on the electronics control module. LIN bus that can communicate with all these different things. And this chip that we're looking at is an 8-pin chip instead of what would be the 14-pin chip. The one we're looking at with 8 pins, there's 2 on each side, 4 on each side that he just highlighted. This one is a single LIN bus controller, right? Yep. And what could have been populated there using those other 6 pins, it would use all 14 pins, is a dual LIN controller chip. And what Jan's whole point in this long odyssey of a conversation is that the ventilated seats use a LIN that would have been present on the bigger chip that's not here on this. It would use one of those 6 pins that we're looking at.
It's exactly this pin, right? So technically, if you wire everything up, you can even code it, but then the module complains that there is a failure in electrical circuits, and that's because
it's trying to talk on a LIN bus that's not
LIN
there.
bus that it's not there. Exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, it's pretty incredible. So what we've not figured out yet, this is where we start to get complicated, and I'm going to let Jan be the guinea pig on this. So what we don't know about retrofitting ventilated seats is if we were able to take the convenience, sorry, I keep saying convenience, the central electronics control module from a car that has ventilated seats, like a 2023 Pro S, sorry, those don't have it. A 2024 Pro S would have ventilated seats. If we were able to get a
it's
junkyard,
actually more complicated than that.
right?
Because on the ID software version 4, VW has moved that functionality into the AC module. So
right. So this is even more complicated.
Completely different. Yes.
Even if you're able to find a control module from maybe a car in Europe that had the ventilated seats that worked with this software, we don't know.
Like Skoda Enyaq, they have it, but maybe there are some other features in
there might be other software features,
Exactly.
So what Jan was going to attempt to do, we could desolder this chip and solder in the 2 LIN bus controller chip. We just don't know if it would work. And honestly, I've got friends that have the skills to solder on something that small. This is, how small is that, Jan? It's smaller than it looks.
Oh, that's a smaller than a pinky nail, like
so those,
a quarter of pinky nail.
It's very small, so you have to be very gifted with a soldering iron.
I would lose, but I'm sure we'll figure it out.
So the point of this whole digression, this whole kind of detour we took into ventilated seats, is that sometimes you can wire everything up electrically, and we're still missing.
Mechanically may fit, right? But then you find that this one piece is just not there.
Okay, and luckily this was not the case for your taillights. They mechanically fit, and then all you had to do was swap a connector and run some wires.
Exactly.
And then now we're just to the coding. So
yes.
The point is, before you spend a lot of money, do your research.
Do your research, exactly. Yeah.
So
yeah. And so, as you said, Wes, there are 2 caveats with this retrofit, which is with any other retrofit, is that, of course, figuring out which adaptation you need to change. But if you have a kit from Kufatech, they'll get you the coding dongle, so it's easy to do. However, after every over-the-air update that touches the modules that you recoded, that your coding is erased because it returns to the factory state.
Yeah.
So
the factory computers know what features are on your car, and they don't have any reason to think they'd be different. And so when they do the software update, they're going to put them back to the way they think they're supposed to be.
Totally.
So you have to be prepared. A lot of shops, one of the nice things about Kufatech, if they sell you an adaptation that comes with that dongle for exactly that reason, that it'll make the coding change. And then if you get an update that reverses it, you can put the dongle back in and it'll make the coding change.
Exactly. The dongle again, like reinstantiates. It's just the easiest way to do the retrofits. 100% agree. 100% agree. Yeah. Cool. So let's take a look at coding adaptations. We already talked about this, that you can, on your car, in the VCDS from Rostec, many people know probably the auto scan or select a specific module that you want to adapt. But what you can also do, you can go into applications. And in the application, there is an application that is called Control Channel Map. And you'll give it an address.
And so if you put in 9 there,
and then hit go,
it's going to give you
everything that looks like this, right? So it gives you every single adaptation, and you see that for the module 9 there's 1,600 of them, and for 19 there's 1,000 of them, right? So 2.6 thousand adaptations.
And that doesn't mean we have to make that many changes. It means that's how many values are set on that module.
Yes.
And I want to take a quick digression and say that for those of you that are not computer or programming people, Jan is using what's called a programmer's text editor. And this particular one is
Visual Studio Code. That is a free download.
It's free for Microsoft. A lot of other people use a free open source one called Notepad++. But regardless, what it lets you do is open up things. You can even do what's called a diff, which is what Jan has done here. He has taken, on the left-hand side is his coding for module 19. The left is the Euro 19. Mm-hmm. And on the right is the US 19, and it's showing what the differences are between those two. It's highlighting the differences, and there are many. And so then Jan's task was, this could be for lots of different features besides the taillights. Now he's got to figure out which ones are going to make his taillights do. Yeah. Right. So now you're comparing your download from your car with the download that someone was kind enough to put on the Rostec VCDS forums.
Yes.
And you ran a diff. A diff is a program that tells you the difference and highlights them. So then you had to go on the journey of finding out what needs to be changed out of these highlighted things to make the taillights
exactly
work.
Because the highlighted changes, they may not be related to the retrofit that you're trying to do. It may be some custom setting that the user has made to the other car, or it may be related to some feature that the other car has that ours does not, right? So it could be all over the board. So I spent literally months of like trial and error and trying to figure out which one is the right one. But of course, I don't want you to do that, because as we mentioned on the GitHub, there is a lot of information, and of course, specifically information for the Euro taillights. So we described.
So Jan did all this work so that you don't have to.
Exactly. Here
you
are the part numbers.
Yeah.
The harness, and here is the coding. So this was the coding in the module 19 in the CAN gateway to kind of enable the lights.
Yeah. Also, if this wasn't tough enough, of course, it's in German. So
on top of everything, yes.
Which luckily, intelligent is pretty clear what that means. This says you can kind of. Luckily, Google Translate and Copilot.
Yeah, the only challenge is that so what I found, and you might be laughing when you listen to this, then there are some names, because this map is, I think, shared across many different brands in VW, right?
Okay.
And I think that there's a lot of legacy in here as well. So as new come, they just snowball, right? So some things that look like I found something and I said, well, that based on the name, that must be it. But it wasn't, and it almost was a rule. Then when I thought that's it wasn't it.
Awesome. So show us the changes one more time on your GitHub. So there's not that. How many did you actually have to change?
Not much, actually. So this is the
13 on the 13 on the module 19.
And then this was
okay.
On the central electronic module. This was a little bit more involving here, because I had to. And this is for another podcast where we can talk about these different light channels that are in the central electronic module, and what these different coding names mean and what you can do. And here's also a bonus, some like quick animation of the front lights.
Okay.
And this is, for example, how the animation is looking like. So when you approach the vehicle, this is how it animates, and you can pick different animations from your
just to let you know that it loves you.
Multimedia. Yeah. Exactly.
I missed you, Jan.
Exactly. And there is one last video that I would love to show, because like all the factory tours show attaching the VW logo or car logo. So this was the last step when I finished the retrofit. The logo itself is not shipped with the central bar of the central taillight. So you have to buy the logo separately. And I did this install, and I really was contemplating, well, should I use the white gloves or no? Because all these videos that I've seen have white gloves, but I decided not to, and here we go.
It looks lovely. And now this is not illuminated.
That is correct. That is not illuminated.
For my 2023 that has an illuminated logo.
Yep. They introduced it after, and that's something that I haven't explored because I've already finished that project.
Yeah. I find it a bit distracting, honestly. I mean, I like it. It's neat to see it from the back, but it's fine.
Cool.
So the summary of this is that we were trying to figure out, how do you determine a feasibility to do a project like that? What's the process for any project? And so this should apply to anything, but specifically for your taillights. The first thing you want to do was determine mechanical feasibility, and you did that. We found that the thing would fit physically without any new hardware. You just unbolt the old one and bolt in the new one. No other parts or fasteners were needed. We showed the example of the GTX accent lights in the front that still fit mechanically, but they require that bumper bracket that you're holding up there, and they require the fascia that goes on top of the lights. So you have to know which parts to buy. But for these taillights, all we had to do was order the taillights, unbolt the old stuff, and you unbolted the light bars from tailgate as well, which means you had to take the tailgate panel off, right?
Yep.
And then to determine electrical feasibility, you're looking at the wiring harnesses and comparing the harness for the two different models. So will it plug into the existing harness? Well, no. Physically, the harness was keyed differently. The blue connector had a different notch than the brown one. And also there were extra wires needed. In addition, now, you have to move them to different places as well? Not all of them, but some of them. Okay. And so the answer was no, the connector is not compatible, but you didn't even have to cut any of the factory wires. You just depinned them and inserted them into the new connector.
Yep.
Right. So that was good. And then you had to figure out, how do you tell the software in the car, code it or adapt it to make it work? And that was also really an odyssey. He had to go through and figure out what all the adaptations were.
It is an endeavor, and so I really think that the easiest and the best way is to look at Kufatec if they have the kit, and if not, then roll up your sleeves, get into it.
Yeah, this is probably not a first mod for somebody though. This is is more complicated. And the last part about your coding, you've done the hard work of determining what had to be coded, but you also need to be able to unlock the SFD protection, which is the remind me what that means in German, but.
Schutzfahrzeugdiagnose, so protect the vehicle diagnostics or adaptations or changing.
Yeah. Well, it's pretty impressive that you figured all this out. And honestly, this is something that I could do fairly easily because of all the really difficult work that you did. But if you hadn't done that, this was months of research, right?
This was, yes. This definitely was months. I realized that I jumped pretty quickly into ordering the lights, right? So I, of course, ordered the lights and then, so I probably cannot easily return them because I would need to ship them back to Europe to the retailer. So I'm like, okay, so I gotta figure this out. So
yeah. Well, it's amazing what you've done. And I think that it's the greatest part about this is, yes, this is difficult, but there's really not that much to be done, right? You're talking about, connecting up 6 wires and swapping a connector and doing some programming, but you're also, if you've never worked with these connectors before, you're not sure how to.
Yeah, not easy. And some of these connectors are wet rated, right? So you need to waterproof that. So there are, of course, challenges when you decide to do it on your own. So and so that's why we have the VWID talk. On the VWID talk, we talked about all these mods, and people can kind of bounce ideas and brainstorm and answer questions. We have great experts that are willing to answer any questions. So if you have any questions, if you want to pursue a mod that you either want to share some findings with others, join VWID Talk, or if you have any questions, join VWID Talk to learn more. And subscribe for the next episode so you don't miss the next one that we'll be releasing. Yeah. Thank you for watching.
Yeah, thanks for sharing all this, Jan. This is great. Thanks, everybody.